Well, welcome to Christ and Culture. This is Pastor Jeff Short, your Bible teacher and cultural analyst. And today we're going to be tackling, again, the subject of food stamps, EBT, SNAP benefits, these kinds of goodies that the government gives out in an ever-expanding welfare state, ever-expanding socialist government. We're going to look at it now because the whole program of SNAP or food stamps is under fire because of the government shutdown and people crying and sobbing and giving threats if they don't get their food stamps because of the government shutdown. And the government is at a standstill right now as far as some of these kinds of programs because the Democrats will not come to the table and negotiate. They want to draw a line in the sand and say, hey, this is no far than this, and we're not budging. And so the Trump administration has said, okay, we're not going to be sending out food stamp money, SNAP benefit money to any of the states. And so we'll just see what happens. We're almost there at the end of the month, and the benefits are going to run out at the end of the month. There will be no new benefits for the next month. And people are crying, and the Democrats are blaming the Republicans. And it's a big mess because of the dependency that now 42 million Americans, or not even Americans, half of all the illegal immigrants in this nation are on food stamps, over half. And so 42 million people in this country are collecting food stamps, or as they call it now, SNAP benefits with a EBT card. It's a credit card-like paying device where you just swipe it in at the grocery counter and it takes it out of an account. And a lot of people, 42 million, have grown dependent on the government feeding them. Here we are in the wealthiest nation, one of the wealthiest nations in the world, the most prosperous nation in the world, and we're having to feed 42 million people within our borders. Why are we doing that? Why are we feeding 42 million? It's because of the expanded role of government. It's because of the radical left and the Democrats have expanded the welfare roles in the last decade or two since Barack Obama took over. If you look at a chart and you show the number of people on food stamps when he took office, and then you see the rise, dramatic rise, almost double the amount of people on food stamps during Barack Obama's presidency. And then finally, Donald Trump's presidency in 2016, you see the decline heading downward, and then all of a sudden Joe Biden takes over, and again a dramatic upturn in the amount of people in our country receiving food stamps and other welfare benefits. It is clearly by now something of a project of the radical left, the Democratic Party, Democratic leadership, to expand federal government, pour more money into entitlement programs like food stamps, and expand the roles of food stamps. So the food stamp 42 million mark that we've reached now, people on food stamps, is largely the result of the Democratic Party and its push to try to give away things in exchange for votes. And that's basically what they're trying to do. They're trying to welcome people, illegals even, into our country, feed them, clothe them, house them in exchange for their vote so that Democrats can remain in power. And so now you have the threat of that food stamp benefit being taken away, and you're seeing so many people cry and whine and protest that, hey, this is my right. This food from the government, free food from the government, is their right, so-called. Well, let's read an article by the Detroit News that I have up on the screen here. And we're going to go through here and I'll comment, but this really touches on a very, very important part as a Christian We have the biblical mandate: if a man does not work, he does not eat. And that mandate, the Apostle Paul revealed it from the Word of God. God spoke through the Apostle Paul, spoke through Jesus Christ, spoke through the apostles in the New Testament. And one of the things God spoke through the New Testament was, if a man does not work, he should not eat. And it's not just a descriptive statement. It's not just describing a situation where if a man doesn't work, well, obviously he won't eat because he doesn't have money enough to buy food. Or if he doesn't work at planting crops and harvesting those crops and processing that food, he will not eat. So if a man does not work, he does not eat is a descriptive statement, but it's also a proscriptive statement, that if a man does not work, he does not deserve to eat. And outside of those very small cases of situations where a man cannot work because of disability, due to injury during war, if a veteran comes back from the battlefront and he's been injured, we need to take up the slack and provide for him food because he cannot work because he was fighting for his nation, defending our country. Or if a man is injured and he's disabled, then he is given disability, which is just and right. We want to help those who are truly in need. But we all know, and statistics show this, that a vast majority of the people on the so-called food stamps, SNAP program do not justly deserve to be given a government handout. They are not working because they don't want to work, or they don't want to exert themselves to find work, and it's easier to just let the government feed them. And we all know that, especially now when this food stamp situation has reached a crisis where people are crying and pounding their fists that they're not going to get their food stamps. It spotlights this program where over half of the illegal immigrants are receiving food stamps. They have no right to food stamps from the Americans who are legally here, who are legal citizens of this nation, who are paying taxes to feed illegal people who shouldn't even be here anyway. This is not right. And I'm glad that this so-called food stamp crisis has hit. We need to talk about it. We need to discuss it. And we need to, as Christians, balance our teachings on charity with our teachings on responsibility. And we can't just go all over to one or the other. We can't just say to people, well, if you're hungry, we'll feed you. No, the Bible says that hunger can be a motivation for getting out there and getting a job and earning a living, and that's a good thing. So let's read the article, and I'll comment a little bit on it, because this is a Christian issue. The Bible does teach on this issue. It teaches responsibility. It teaches charity, but only if the individual has done all they can do to help themselves, and then their neighbor, their family, their friends, their church should step in and help if they can't help themselves. But that's not the problem today. We have people who can help themselves, but simply won't, or simply don't. And they grow dependent on a big government that just feeds them and houses them and does everything for them. And that's not how you grow responsible people. That is not a biblical life. So the headline here in the Detroit News is Michigan lawmakers weigh intervening as food assistance cutoff looms. So the Michigan governor and lawmakers are deciding whether they should take from the Michigan taxpayers and give free food money to people who are not going to get the so-called SNAP benefits if the government is shut down. It says Democrats who control the state Senate and said Wednesday that they are exploring the possibility of intervening and attempting to prevent about 1.4 Michigan residents from losing access to food aid beginning this weekend. The amid the federal government shutdown. But lawmakers' efforts, which could include allocating about $250 million to fund supplemental nutrition assistance program benefits in the state for a month, face a difficult and uncertain road in a narrowly divided legislature. It's unclear whether there would be enough votes to pass a bill in the Democratic-controlled Senate. Plus, Republicans have a majority of seats in the House, which would also have to support a measure for it to become law. On Wednesday, State Senator Kevin Hertel, Democrat, St. Clair Shores, said he would support finding a way to keep SNAP aid going in Michigan and help food banks meet the needs and the looming loss of food assistance is already creating. Well, how about thinking in terms of examining the roles of people who are on food stamps and trying to figure out who genuinely needs it and who doesn't, and who is taking advantage of the system and who is simply injured or in a situation where they actually cannot survive without it. Because everybody knows that a very, very many, probably a majority of people on food stamps, even in just one state, Michigan, are there not because they need it, not because it's a necessity, but because it's a convenience for them. They would like to have free food. And this is something that a lot of people totally skip over. I've been involved in food banks as a pastor and as a member of a church many different times. And it's very strange, the mentality at these food banks, because for one, they measure success as the number of people that come through the doors. So they say, hey, last year we served 500 people, but we're growing. This year we serve 1,000 people food. And it just seems like there's more and more people lining up to use our services at the food bank. So we're growing, we're succeeding, and everything like that. But I wanted to turn that back around and say to these organizers, look, it isn't success if more and more people are wanting to use a food bank. It isn't success because that means that there are less and less people who are self-sufficient and they're not providing for themselves. And to get right down to the brass tacks, if you give people free food in the United States, they will line up to get it. Whether they need it or not, they will line up. If you give free anything, pretty much, there will be a whole big line out in front of your building to get the free whatever you're offering. And that's just human nature. So it isn't success if you keep expanding the role of dependency in your community and say, hey, we're succeeding. There's a big need out there for food. Yes, everyone has a need for food, but there also is the responsibility of being self-sufficient, providing for your families, providing for yourself, not taking a handout when you can provide for yourself or when you don't need it. If you look at the line of people lined up for the food banks, you are not going to see a picture of, say, like a third world nation where all of these skinny, emaciated people who are starving are just looking for something to keep them alive the next day. No, you will find very well-fed, overweight Americans lined up to get more free food. And so we're dealing with a situation that our government created. It created an atmosphere of dependency. And now people feel they're entitled to this. Hey, I don't deserve to be anything less than overweight in this country, they think. It says we have to do everything we can to help. How about re-examining the whole program and making sure that you're giving it to people that actually genuinely needy and not just moochers who are just taking advantage of the system? Last week, state officials announced that food benefits for 1.4 Michiganians would be delayed in November due to insufficient funding during the federal shutdown. So they're just going to be delayed. They're not even saying that we're cutting off the whole program. They just will be delayed. And people are up in arms about that. I mean, as if it's the government's job to actually feed every person. No, it is not their job. And the Bible teaches responsibility. It teaches us that we are to not go looking for someone to give us something if we can provide that something for ourselves. And it's not enough to just say, well, I would like the food. No. It doesn't matter if you want the food or would like the food. You don't deserve the food. And the charity should go to the most needy and not just simply people who don't want to work or don't want to pay for their own food. The U.S. Department of Agriculture within Republican President Donald Trump's administration previously said 42 million people, 42 million across the country will not receive their SNAP benefits come November 1st. And I think that's great. I think it's great for the fact that we need to address this whole entitlement program. And we need to clean up the rolls. If you're an able-bodied adult male, especially in the inner city, and you're collecting food stamps simply because you don't want to go out and work and you don't want to provide for yourself and you'd like to get the government to give you free food every day, no, that's not enough. That is an insane program and it needs to stop. It's not fair and it's immoral. Why should your neighbor pay for your food just because you don't want to work, or just because it's hard to work, or inconvenient for you to work, or you'd rather do something else? No, you need to go out and earn a living and provide for yourself and your family. And don't father children and leave them with the woman that you got pregnant, and she shouldn't be looking to the government to give her free food either, and housing and clothing and everything else like we have today. She needs to be thinking ahead and saying, hey, look, I need to marry the man that I get pregnant from, and we need to raise a family together. And that's how it works. That's how an orderly society works. Well, we've really messed things up with the government intervening this way, because not only do the men say, well, the government will provide for my girlfriend who got pregnant and has 4 kids. Well, now the women think that way. Well, the government will provide for me. And unfortunately, they have for many decades, but we need to stop this. In one statement, the USDA blamed congressional Democrats for blocking government funding. And specifically, they said that there was no provision that allowed for the states to cover benefit costs and later be reimbursed. But on Wednesday, Senator Jeff Irwin, Democrat, Ann Arbor, said the Trump administration is using hungry people as a leverage in the shutdown fight. Hungry people. Really. So people are going to starve to death because the government doesn't give them a free lunch. Now, a lot of people will say, well, it's not fair to do this to the children. The parents are at fault because of bad, irresponsible choices, women choosing to get pregnant without a husband there to provide. There are consequences for doing immoral things like fornicating and living together without marriage. And also the men who impregnate these women walk away and don't feel responsible for the children that they begat. But it's not fair for the children, some people will say. Here's the reply to that. Most of the children, especially like here in Michigan, Detroit, the big cities, most of them get a free breakfast and a lunch at school. So basically, the only responsibility the mother has to feed them, the unwed mother with 3 or 4 kids, is their supper time or mealtime food. And so that makes it even less of a burden on her, really. But see, that's not enough, because she's been so dependent on the government for all these many decades, is that she is now entitled. She feels entitled that, hey, I shouldn't have to go hungry, and I should even be able to go get overweight through the government spending money on my food bill, and this will be an inconvenience to me. And she's crying about that. Irwin said he would not support allocating money from the state's $2.2 billion rainy day fund to provide a lifeline to Michiganians who depend on their monthly SNAP benefits, formerly known as food stamps. State legislators could provide a temporary bridge that covers costs until federal lawmakers agree to a funding plan to reopen the federal government. I really do think it's a good time for the federal government to actually rethink the whole food stamp program. Again, to go through the whole program and say, how do we make sure that the grifters and the moochers and the able-bodied men especially and the welfare queens and these women who irresponsibly go out and get pregnant and expect the government to feed them, how do we weed out those people to make this a temporary emergency program that you turn to only as a last resort instead of the first resort? I mean, people are reacting and acting like food stamps is like their first move. It's like, why isn't government paying for my free food? Why isn't government giving me free breakfast, free lunch, free dinner? Why do I have to go out and earn my own keep and food? And why do I have to put food on my own table? Why doesn't the government do? They're acting entitled. And that's the problem. That has to stop. And there needs to be thankful gratitude for whenever the emergency rises and some person or a family actually needs to use food stamps. And there are situations in which there are real emergencies where there is no other way that a family can feed themselves in a temporary situation, and so they have to turn to the government. That's fine. But that is far from where we're at right now, where this government dependency entitlement attitude is, well, probably majority of people on the 42 million people on food stamps are actually not actually needing it. What matters in the near term is making sure that we feed hungry people and that we make sure the children don't go hungry, and that we don't suffer the unnecessary economic damage that this disruption will cause for the 1.4 million who rely on SNAP and other 8.6 of us also who benefit. So there's a lot in there. There's a lot of propaganda. The Democrats and the radical left like to say that the SNAP program, the 42 million people spending money at the grocery store, really helps the economy, really stimulates the economy, keeps businesses going. They want to try to make that argument, which is totally false. You're propping up businesses that are already prosperous. Walmart receives most of the food stamp money, and they are wealthy enough. They're prosperous enough. They don't need government funding. Walmart and some of the big box retailers like even Amazon, you can order EBT cards, SNAP cards can order food from Amazon. So we don't need to be subsidizing Amazon by the government through food stamps, and we don't need to be subsidizing Walmart through food stamps. So it's not really helping the economy. It's actually taking billions and billions out of the economy and redistributing them to people who, in the majority of the cases, don't actually deserve the assistance and don't need the assistance. And it would probably, if food stamps went away, it would probably cut the obesity problem that we have in our country, even among children. It would probably help and make America healthier, and it would actually help the economy if we got all of these people off the government dole. The average low-income household in Michigan receives $335 in SNAP benefits per month last year on prepaid cards to defray their grocery bills. Individuals average $173 per month, according to the state. So you can be an individual, single person, able-bodied male, who isn't working, doesn't have a job, and you can pick up $173 per month for food. That's a lot. That is way a lot. A single person can live very well on $173 for food. And a household income, that's the average. So there are a lot of people that are getting a lot more than $335 as a family. So that is way too much. And it's used to help defray their grocery bills. You don't need it to defray the grocery bills. If you're bringing in that much, that could be the whole grocery bill right there. If you're wisely spending and not splurging and buying sugary drinks, that's one of the most popular items in the EBT list is sugary drinks. Why are people who are on food stamps allowed to buy sugary drinks, non-nutritional drinks? Why are they allowed to buy anything like desserts or some kind of sweets or snacks or any of that? They should be limited to just the basics, just the foundational things to help them be responsible in buying things. If they're truly in need, they'll say, oh, I only want to buy milk, I want to buy bread, I want to buy things like rice and beans, I want to buy some basic meat like chicken or beef or pork, I want to buy eggs for breakfast, I want to buy some soup. The very basic of the basics of survival food, that's what they should be allowed to buy. And if they want to get anything else, they've got to come up with their own money, which they should be working toward anyway, to buy anything better. But no way should there be an allowance for sugary drinks like pop and sugar water. This is a waste of our taxpayers' money. It's a waste. It's not hurting the health of these recipients. And this is just common sense, but common sense has been thrown out the window when you're talking to the radical left and the Democrats, because they like to spend, and tax, and take away from the hardworking people and those who are responsible and give it to the people who they think will vote for them in the next election. And this has to stop. This has to stop. And I'm glad that there's a crisis in food stamps, and I'm glad people are worried about it, because it makes us all examine this program and say, look, what are we doing? Why are we spending like this? This is crazy. This makes no sense. It's not Christian. It's not biblical. We shouldn't be doing it. Natasha Bell, 42, a resident of downtown Detroit, uses SNAP assistance to buy food from various grocery stores. When asked Wednesday about the federal government shutdown potentially halting food assistance, she said officials just need to get it together. That is so stupid. Get it together? What are you talking about? You get it together. You need to get it together. You need to get yourself together, get your life together. Rearrange your priorities, rearrange your life so that you make wise decisions, so you don't end up having to put your hand out to the government to feed you. This is a basic life skill. And she's 42 and she's now still dependent on the government to feed her. What did life teach her all along the way these 42 years? Did her parents ever teach her responsibility? Did they ever teach her a little common sense wisdom? How to spend, how not to spend, how to save, not to waste. People shouldn't starve over politics, that's for sure, Bell said. It's not about politics, about personal responsibility. You need to learn responsibility. We're going to have to go part 2 on this. We'll see you back next week on another program. God bless.